I want to talk about something quickly, and it's about ADHD. I suffer from ADHD, and I know I suffer from ADHD because when I started taking the medication, I got a huge amount of benefit from it. Not, I got some negatives from it and some benefits from it, so it kind of balanced out a little bit anyway. But the one of the main symptoms that I suffered from with ADHD was a thing called ADHD fatigue. And ADHD fatigue is not used in the clinical diagnosis of ADHD. So when a psychiatrist diagnoses you with ADHD, if you say you're fatigued, automatically they won't think that you have ADHD because they haven't educated themselves in the modern studies in ADHD in adults. ADHD in adults, fatigue is a very real thing, and they're actually making connections with ADHD fatigue and chronic fatigue. So people who suffer from chronic fatigue could actually be suffering from ADHD. Now this isn't actually new news. This has been around for a while. But still, the NHS in Scotland and in England and Wales and Northern Ireland still don't use fatigue as a symptom for ADHD. And I've had multiple suicide attempts because the sheer fight to actually do things during the day, to the sheer fight to find the energy to do anything is debilitating. It's mentally debilitating and physically debilitating. Not only are you tired because you can't find the energy, you're tired because your condition is making you tired. And there's no real fix for it. There's no real fix for it. You don't wash, you don't shave, you don't brush your teeth. You know what I mean? Your relationships are affected because you haven't got the energy to give your partner the emotional and mental support that they expect of you. Suicide is extremely high because you get to the point where you are so tired, you just can't go on. You just can't fight it any longer. And addiction is high in ADHD also, like smoking weed and because your mind is so tired, because your body is so tired, you look for ways of shutting your mind down when you're awake. So you physically can't do anything, so you regress into a negative mindset. That negative mindset then sets you on a suicidal path. It's a vicious circle. And if you can't break that vicious circle, then you end up just in a level of despair that is just you can't even explain it properly. You can't even tell people exactly what it is. But unless you've ever suffered from chronic fatigue or you've suffered from ADHD fatigue, you won't know how tired you are. I mean, people say, "Oh, I get tired all the time. I'm tired of this, and tired of that." When I started taking my ADHD medication, it started to help me with my fatigue, which is a benefit of the medication, but it's not listed as it's not listed as a, a symptom of ADHD. So the medication isn't meant to help you with that, even though it does, right? Because it's methamphetamines, right? So it's methylamphetamide is basically methamphetamines. It's speed. So it does help you with the fighting past the barrier of fatigue, and it allows you to focus more on the things that you want to do, the things that you want to do. It has other side effects as well, like bad stomach problems, and it has bad stomach problems, and it really affects your mind in a negative, well, not in a negative way, in a more violent way. So you become a little bit more aggressive. You become a little bit more, how do I say it? I don't want to sound like a psychopath, but you become a little bit more angry quickly. Something annoys you, you get angry quickly. You lose control quickly. So there's that element to it, and then there's the thinking element. It's hard to put it into words, but what your mind does is it constantly thinks all the time. With ADHD especially, your mind is constantly running over things. A lot of it negative things, but the ADHD kind of balances that out a little. The ADHD medication, balances that out a little bit. But then what happens is you start overthinking things. You start watching. Oh, you start psychoanalyzing everything. That becomes tiresome. It helps with one aspect, and then gives you other things in return. I prefer not to feel tired all the time because it brings me away from the suicidal element of ADHD. So because of the tiredness and the fatigue and the fight, I was very suicidal. I attempted to take my life more times than the NHS actually know. The times that I ended up in the NHS, those were the times that I was close. Actually, probably I was closest when I took a load of tramadol. I took close to 40 tramadol, tried to off myself. But that was because I was tired. It wasn't because I was depressed. It wasn't because my mind was, like in a negative place. It was because I was tired. I was tired of having to fight every single day. And it just and the level of understanding towards it is virtually zero. And society has given us these things. I wasn't born with I was born with ADHD, but it wasn't because everything was normal. It was because my mother smoked when she was pregnant. My mother smoked when she was pregnant, and as a result, her pregnancy was complicated. I was starved of oxygen for about 3 minutes. They had to cut me out of her. She passed away, I passed away. They managed to revive us both, and it gave me brain damage. And probably that's where it came from, right? I ended up so young that my brain not developing in the right way. I had dyslexia. I have dyslexia. I got ADHD, probably SPD as well, which is sensory processing disorder, because certain things trigger my mind, and like electric motors and stuff like that, hair dryers, hoovers, these kind of things. The way that I develop a relationship with a woman is turmoil, because my own mind isn't balanced enough to understand what's going on sometimes. And even just explaining this now, trying to explain it to you guys is difficult because I can't articulate myself properly. I can't convey how I feel properly so as you understand. But ADHD fatigue is the killer in ADHD, because that's why people get tired and they just kill themselves because they're sick of the fight. They can't go on any longer, so they just commit suicide. I was in a special needs class at school, and 6 of those people are now dead. I don't know whether they suffered from ADHD or what mental illness they did suffer from, but they had learning disabilities the same as me, and probably relative to the same thing. Suicide rates are higher in ADHD people and autistic people than people realise. But it's gone unchecked. The NHS don't want to recognise ADHD fatigue, so we go untreated. Fight for your disorder, because there is medication that will help.